The night it all finally broke. The city felt strangely quiet. No sirens, no shouting, just the low hum of distant traffic leaking through the thin windows of our apartment. I remember thinking how peaceful it sounded for a night my marriage was dying. It started with small things, the kind you convince yourself not to notice. Her phone always face down, her laughter coming from the other room, softer and lighter than it had been with me in years. The way she started lingering in the hallway after work, replying to just one more message before coming to sit with me on the couch. Dinner became quiet, not the comfortable kind of quiet we used to have. Not the we've been together so long, we know each other's thoughts kind of silence. This was a stiff, fragile silence. The sound of cutlery on plates, the clink of glasses, the occasional polite, "How was your day?" that neither of us really listened to. She worked in marketing. Late nights were normal sometimes. Campaigns, launches, clients in different time. I used to joke that her real partner was the office coffee machine, but then the late nights started following a pattern. Always Tuesdays and Thursdays. Always the same rushed explanation as she slipped on her coat. They scheduled another last-minute meeting. I swear these people don't sleep. Always that half-guilty smile she gave me from the doorway, as if she knew I didn't love it, but trusted her anyway. I did trust her, for longer than I should have. The first time I really felt the distance was on a Wednesday morning. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen window, and the world outside was soaked in. I was standing at the counter, pouring coffee, when she walked in already dressed, hair done, makeup perfect. "Morning," I said, sliding her mug across the counter. She smiled, but it was distracted, halfway stuck to the notification lighting up her phone on the table. Her eyes flicked down, reading something, and then that look. That tiny involuntary curl at the corner of her mouth, like a secret had just whispered itself to her. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked up, the smile gone so fast it might have been my imagination. "Oh, just work," she said, picking up the phone and locking it. Her hand covered the screen like a reflex. She took the coffee, kissed my cheek, and headed out. The door clicked shut. The apartment felt larger somehow, emptier. I told myself I was being paranoid. Everyone hides their phone sometimes. Everyone has inside jokes with coworkers. Everyone scrolls through messages at the table. But the rain that morning felt like a warning. Like the sky knew something I didn't. Weeks passed. She grew more distant. I grew more observant. Her perfume would linger stronger when she came home, like she'd just reapplied it in someone else's car. She started humming again, little melodies under her breath, while washing dishes, while picking out clothes. I hadn't heard her hum in months. I used to take it as a good sign that she was happy, but it wasn't me she was humming for anymore. The night it all cracked open, I wasn't trying to catch her. I was just trying to remember how to sleep. She had another late meeting, and I sat in the living room with the TV on low, not really watching. The glow of the screen painted the empty couch in cold light, making her absence feel more solid. I scrolled through my phone, aimless. Social media, sports scores, news. Anything but the thought that my wife was somewhere else, laughing that soft, private laugh. Around 10:30 p.m. my phone buzzed. It was a message from my bank, one of those alerts I always ignored, but this time I opened it. "Thank you for using your card. $12.40, Café Lumière, 10:21 p.m. I frowned. I was home. My wallet was on the coffee table. Her card was linked to her own account, separate from mine. I picked up my wallet. The card was there. I checked the last 4 digits in the message. They matched my card. For a second, my brain refused to understand. Then the memory surfaced. 3 months ago, I had given her my card at the gas station when she forgot hers. She must have saved it on her phone for some reason. Or for some person. I opened my banking app, heart pounding. There it was, a pattern. A cafe on Tuesdays, a restaurant on Thursdays, small amounts, not enough to ring alarm bells, just coffee, maybe dessert, but always the exact nights she was working late. I looked up Café Lumière on my phone. It was a small place downtown, open late, candles on the tables, soft jazz. The kind of place people chose on purpose. No one accidentally ended up there. My chest felt tight. My hands shook as I grabbed my keys. I didn't plan what I would say. I just knew that I couldn't sit in that dim, lonely living room one more minute wondering. The drive was a blur of red lights and wet pavement. Rain streaked across the windshield, catching the glow of street lamps. Inside the car, the air felt too warm and too cold at the same time. I parked half a block away. For a moment, I just sat there, fingers gripping the steering wheel, watching my own breath fog the inside of the windshield. I didn't want to be the man who checked, the man who followed, the man who needed proof, but I was already there. I stepped out into the drizzle and walked toward the cafe. Through the large front window, I could see couples talking, friends laughing, steam curling up from cups. Soft light, warm and golden, spilled onto the wet sidewalk. And then I saw her. She was sitting by the window in a corner table. Her back was turned slightly toward me, but I knew that posture, the way she leaned forward when she was truly interested. The way her hands wrapped around a cup, but her attention wrapped around the person in front of her. Opposite her sat a man I had never seen before. Dark hair, clean shirt, a watch that looked expensive in a quiet way. He was smiling, saying something. She laughed, really laughed, head tilted back, eyes shining. The laugh I hadn't heard from her in what felt like years. My stomach dropped. The sounds of the city faded to a distant buzz. Inside the glass, her world was warm and bright. Out here, the rain prickled my skin. She reached across the table and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. He flipped his palm, laced their fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. Something inside me went quiet. Not broken, just quiet, like someone had turned down the volume on my entire life. I could have stormed in. I could have shouted, accused, thrown the door open so hard the bell rattled against the glass. I could have asked him his name, demanded to know how long, asked her why I wasn't enough. Instead, I stayed on the sidewalk, a few feet from the glass, the rain soaking through my jacket. Watching them like they were a movie, I hadn't bought tickets. Her phone lit up on the table. For a moment, her eyes dropped to it. My name flashed on the screen. She didn't pick it up. She let it ring out, her thumb hovering, then turning the screen face down. When she looked back at him, her smile was softer, almost apologetic. He squeezed her hand. I turned away. The walk back to my car felt longer than the drive there. Every step sounded louder on the wet pavement. My keys felt sharp in my hand, metal biting into skin I could barely feel. I sat behind the wheel, stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the man looking back. By the time I got home, my clothes were damp, my hair dripping onto the kitchen floor. The apartment was dark, quiet, exactly as I had left it. Her chair at the dinner table sat empty, pulled slightly away from the table like she had just stepped out for a second. An empty chair in an empty room. I sat down in it. The silence pressed in, the hum of the fridge, the distant traffic, the faint drip of rain against the window. Inside that silence, the image of her hand in his replayed over and over, like a loop I couldn't pause. I stared at the spot across from me where she usually sat, the faint outline of her coffee mug ring on the table, the impression of a life that had been here until it wasn't. My phone buzzed on the table. Her name lit up the screen. For a long moment, I just watched it ring, watched it stop, watched the missed call notification pop up. Then, with fingers that didn't quite feel like mine, I reached out and let it keep ringing. The night my marriage collapsed didn't end with a fight. It ended with me alone at the table, staring at an empty chair, listening to a phone I couldn't answer, and knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The days after that night blurred together into something that didn't feel like time. It felt more like being underwater. Everything was muffled, slow, distant. She came home late that night, slipping off her heels at the door, trying to be quiet like she didn't want to wake me. I was sitting in the dark living room, the TV off, the only light coming from the city bleeding through the blinds. "Oh," she said, stopping when she saw me. Her voice had that startled, guilty note I recognized from teenagers and late employees, not from my wife. "You're still up." I just looked at her. The rain had left her hair slightly damp, and there was a faint trace of someone else's cologne clinging to her coat. She hugged herself like she was cold. "How was the meeting?" I asked. She blinked. "It was long," she said. Her eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. 11:42 p.m. "Did the clients like Café Lumière?" I asked. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It wasn't stiff or fragile. It was honest in a way words couldn't be. Her face drained of color. Her bag slipped slightly off her shoulder. "WH what?" she whispered. "I got a notification," I said quietly. "My card. The one I gave you to use that one time, you remember." I swallowed. "Seems like you've been remembering it a lot." She stared at me, eyes wide, lips parted. For a second, I saw the old her, the one who would have laughed at the absurdity, rushed over, insisted this was all a misunderstanding. But the denial never came. The truth just sat there, heavy between us. "I'm tired," she said, voice small. "Can we talk about this tomorrow?" That was the first night she slept in the guest room, not because I told her to, but because she couldn't cross that invisible line between us and lie down beside me like nothing had changed. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. The rain had stopped. The sky outside was a flat, empty. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "Let's talk tonight, please." Her handwriting shook. Mine did too when I picked it up. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't scream. It echoes. Every room I walked into that day, I saw us. Dinner on the couch. Her laughing over some stupid meme. our hands brushing as we both reached for the same coffee mug. By evening, the apartment felt too small. We sat across from each other at the table, like we were at some kind of negotiation. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged. She had clearly been crying long before she'd come home. How long? I asked. She stared at her hands. Please don't do this like an interrogation, she whispered. It's my life, I said. My marriage. I think I get to ask at least that much. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, as if wiping away evidence. 6 months, she said finally. 6 months. Half a year of late meetings. Half a year of me sitting on the couch, waiting for a door that was closed somewhere else. Who is he? I asked. The words tasted bitter. She hesitated. A client, she said quietly. We started talking about work, then it just didn't stay about work. I let out a humorless laugh. Of course. He listened, she said. Her eyes flicked up to mine, pleading. That's not an excuse, I know, but I felt like I was disappearing and I made you feel invisible, I finished for her. She flinched. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The more she spoke, the more the man solidified in my mind. He wasn't just an abstract threat anymore. He had a job, a story, a face I had seen in that cafe window. Does he know you're married? I asked. Yes, she said, too quickly. He didn't want to at first. But then we kept talking, and I told him everything. Everything, the humiliation settled like a heavy coat on my shoulders. Private fights, private fears, private jokes that no longer felt private, handed over to a stranger piece by piece, like gifts he hadn't earned. What did you tell him about me? I asked. My voice cracked on the last word. She swallowed. That you're a good man, she said. That you're stable, loyal, kind. She let out a broken laugh, and that I didn't know how to be the wife you deserve anymore. The words were supposed to comfort me, maybe. They didn't. They landed like stones. I didn't throw anything. I didn't shout. I didn't even stand up. I just sat there, feeling something unravel quietly inside me. Are you in love with him? I asked. The pause that followed was the longest of my life. She stared at the table, then at the wall, then finally at me. I don't know, she whispered. That was worse than yes, because yes would have been a decision. Don't know meant she was still standing in the doorway, halfway between our life and his. After that night, we moved through the apartment like ghosts. She kept trying to talk. I kept running out of words. I slept on one side of the bed, facing the wall. She slept in the guest room, door cracked halfway open, like she was waiting for an invitation back that never came. The traces of him were everywhere. In the way she checked her phone and then looked guilty. In the way she looked at me, as if comparing us even when she didn't want to. In the way she'd drift into a stare, smiling faintly at nothing, at some memory I wasn't in. One night I woke up at 3 a.m. The city was quiet. The sky outside was ink dark. I went to the kitchen for water and saw the faint blue glow of her phone in the guest room. She was awake, sitting up in bed, phone pressed to her chest like a secret. Her face was streaked with tears. She didn't see me in the doorway. I can't keep doing this, she whispered, voice cracking. I can't keep lying. For a second I thought she was talking to herself. Then I saw the name on the screen. His. Maybe we should stop, she said after a pause. Her voice was barely audible. It's hurting him. It's destroying him. Destroying. Like it was some natural disaster we had no control over, not a choice she kept making every Tuesday and Thursday. I stepped back before she could see me. I didn't want to be the man eavesdropping on his own life. The turning point wasn't cinematic. There was no dramatic confrontation, no suitcase thrown out into the hall. It happened quietly, on a Tuesday morning, with sunlight filtering weakly through the curtains. I was making coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and bitter. She walked in, hair messy, eyes hollow. We need to separate, she said. The words came out flat, practiced, like she'd already said them in her head 100 times. I looked at her. Some part of me had been waiting for her to fight for us, to say she'd cut him off, go to therapy, do whatever it took, some grand gesture that would prove I still mattered more. Instead, she stood there in my oversized t-shirt, looking like a stranger who had accidentally walked into the wrong apartment. Is that what you want? I asked. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't know what I want, she said, but I know I can't keep watching you hurt every time you look at me. You could stop doing the thing that's hurting me, I said gently. She let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. I tried, she said. I blocked him, then I unblocked him. I told him it was over, and then I called him again. I don't even recognize myself anymore. It was the most honest she had been since this started. And somehow it made everything worse. We agreed she would stay with her sister for a while. Space, she called it, to think, to figure things out. I watched her pack, not everything, just clothes, toiletries, a few books, her laptop. She left behind the framed photos, the knickknacks we'd collected on trips, the plant we bought together that was still clinging to life on the windowsill. She paused at the doorway, suitcase handle in her hand. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. I believed her. That was the tragedy of it. "I know," I said. "That doesn't mean you didn't." The door clicked shut behind her. The apartment exhaled. In the weeks that followed, I became intimately familiar with empty rooms. The way her absence echoed more loudly than her presence ever had. Her toothbrush missing from the sink, her shoes gone from the mat by the door. Her side of the bed untouched, the pillow staying perfectly fluffed. I tried to build new routines. Work, gym, laundry. I walked the city streets at night, letting the rain soak through my jacket, feeling the cold on my skin like proof that I was still here. Sometimes I imagined him. The other man, sitting in his own apartment maybe, thinking he'd won, or maybe feeling as lost as I did, realizing he was part of someone else's wreckage. I wondered if he checked his phone the way I did. If he waited for her messages, if he stared at her name the way I used to, feeling both grateful and terrified when it appeared. One night, weeks after she left, I opened her drawer. It felt like a violation, but it was my drawer too once. Inside, I found a small notebook. I almost put it back. Almost. Instead, I opened it. The pages weren't filled with love notes or explicit confessions, nothing cinematic or dramatic. They were lists, thoughts, fragments of sentences. I don't know who I am with him. I feel seen. I feel guilty. I hate what I'm doing. I can't stop. He makes me feel alive. He makes me terrified. She had been torn long before I noticed. By the time I saw the cracks, she had already been standing on the edge for months. I closed the notebook and put it back. Some truths were too sharp to hold for long. People talk about revenge like it's fire, like it's loud, consuming, obvious. But sitting alone in that quiet apartment, surrounded by the ruins of what we used to be, I realized something. The real revenge wouldn't be a scene. It wouldn't be screaming, public shaming, or dramatic ultimatums. The real revenge would be quieter, patient. It would be the day she realized what she'd thrown away, the day the shine faded from his life, the day everything she chose him for started to crumble. I didn't know when that day would come. I didn't know what it would look like. I just knew that if I ever got the chance to stand in front of her again after everything fell apart for him, I would not be the same man she had once expected to wait. It happened on a Sunday morning, long after I had stopped waiting for any kind of apology. Months had passed since she left. The seasons had shifted. The rain grew lighter the mornings. I had learned the shape of my life without her. The apartment didn't feel like a museum to our marriage anymore. The empty spaces were still there, but I'd filled some of them. A new mug where hers used to be, a different blanket on the couch. Quiet music on in the evenings, not to drown out thoughts, but to keep me company. I had even started sleeping through the night again, most nights anyway. That morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds, spilling onto the wooden floor in pale, golden. The city outside was already awake, distant traffic, someone laughing on the street below, a dog barking faintly. I made coffee like I always did, the ritual comforting in its simplicity. The knock at the door was soft, almost hesitant. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't dressed for company, just sweatpants, an old t-shirt, the kind of clothes you only wear when you're alone and not trying to impress anyone. I opened the door. She was there. For a second, my brain refused to match the image with reality. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but as if something in her had shrunk. Her shoulders were hunched, her hair a little messier than she used to keep it. Her eyes, those familiar eyes, were ringed with exhaustion. "Hi," she said. Her voice was quiet, and it trembled on that single syllable. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was something softer and more painful, recognition. This was the woman I once loved enough to promise forever to. This was also the woman who had put her hand in someone else's and walked out the door. "How did you get in?" I asked, not moving aside. She held up the old key. "I never gave it back," she said. "I can if you want, I didn't use it." I knocked. It felt important to her, that detail. A small confession that she knew this wasn't her home anymore. I didn't invite her in immediately. The silence between us stretched, full of things we both remembered and couldn't say yet. After a moment, I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. She walked in slowly, like she was entering a stranger's house. Her eyes swept over the living room, lingering on tiny changes. A different lamp, a new plant, the absence of a framed photo that used to sit on the shelf. "You changed things," she said softly. "Some of them," I replied. She nodded as if she'd expected that. There was a tension in the air, but it wasn't the crackling, explosive kind. It was quieter, heavier, like the lingering smoke after a fire. "Do you want coffee?" I asked, out of habit more than anything. She hesitated, then nodded. "Please." We sat at the table, just like we had so many times before, but everything was different. Her hands cradled the mug, fingers wrapped tightly around the warmth. She stared into the swirling black surface like it might show her a better version of this moment. "How have you been?" she asked. It was a ridiculous question. A courtesy for acquaintances, not for someone who had broken you open and walked away. "I've been learning," I said finally. "Learning what?" "How to live alone," I said. "How to make coffee for one. How to fill evenings without waiting for the sound of a key in the door." She winced. "I deserve that," she whispered. I didn't argue. For a while we just sat there, the hum of the fridge and the faint traffic outside filling the spaces where conversation should have been. Eventually, she took a breath. "He lost everything," she said. I knew immediately who she meant. No name, no explanation, just he. "He," I repeated, my tone neutral. She nodded. "He invested in something stupid, too much risk. The company he was working with tanked. Clients pulled out. He went under." I watched her carefully. The words spilled out of her in a rush, like she'd been rehearsing them in her head. "He lost his apartment," she continued. "He couldn't make payments on his car. Some legal stuff started. I don't even understand all of it. It happened so fast. One minute he was this confident, untouchable guy, and then—" She snapped her fingers, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Gone." There it was, the collapse I had imagined but never fully pictured. "And you?" I asked. "Where were you in all this?" Her eyes filled with tears. "With him," she said, "at first. I thought this was my chance to prove it wasn't just about the excitement, that I wasn't the kind of person who ran when things got hard." The irony was not lost on either of us. "I supported him," she said. "I gave him money. I lied to my family about why I needed loans. I sat with him on the floor of his new place, a single room with a mattress and boxes everywhere. I told him we'd rebuild, start over." She laughed bitterly. "Do you know what he said?" I stayed silent. "He said," she swallowed. "He said he missed the version of me from the beginning, the one who wasn't always sad or guilty or complicated." Her fingers tightened around the mug. "He said being with me now was exhausting, that my regret was like a weight around his neck. He said he already had enough problems." The words landed between us like shards of glass. "So he left," I said. She nodded. "He told me I should go back to my perfect little life, that maybe my husband would still take me back, because I was good at pretending." Silence again. "You know," she said quietly, "for the longest time I thought you were the safe choice. The predictable one, the boring one, I guess." Her voice broke on that word. "And he was the risk, the spark, the one who made me feel alive." She looked up at me, eyes raw. "But when everything fell apart for him, I realized something. You were the one who would have stayed. You were the one who actually understood what commitment meant. He only loved me when I made his life more exciting. You loved me when I was ordinary." It was a strange kind of compliment, arriving years too late. "Why are you here?" I asked gently. Her shoulders shook. Tears slipped down her face, dripping onto the table. "Because I lost everything too," she whispered. "I lost you. I lost the version of myself I liked. I lost the home we built." And when he finally showed me who he really was, I realized I had traded a lifetime for a moment. She took a shaky breath. "I'm not here to pretend nothing happened," she said. "I'm not here to ask you to just forget. I know that's impossible. I need you to know I'm sorry. Really, truly, deeply sorry. And if there is any part of you, any small corner of your heart, that still believes we could try again, Her voice cracked completely. "I would do anything. Therapy, rebuilding trust, whatever you need. I'll wait, I'll earn it." The words she had once refused to say were now spilling out of her like a flood, begging, pleading. Once upon a time, I would have dreamed of this moment. Back when I was replaying every memory, every kiss, every shared joke, wondering what I could have done differently. I imagined her coming back, realizing her mistake, choosing me all over again. And yet, sitting across from her now, watching her crumble, I felt something I wasn't prepared for. Pity, sadness, but not the same kind of love. "I believe you're sorry," I said quietly. She looked up, hope flickering. "I believe you didn't mean for any of this to happen," I continued. "That you got lost in something that felt bigger than you, that you were hurting and looking for a shortcut out of that pain." Her lips trembled. "But," she whispered. I looked around the apartment, at the little signs of my new life, the routines I had stitched together from the ruins, the peace I'd fought tooth and nail to find, but the version of me who would have taken you back just because he was afraid of being alone. I shook my head. "He doesn't live here anymore." She stared at me as if the words took time to reach her. "I can't go back to that man," I said, "the one who would bend himself into impossible shapes just to be chosen. The one who would accept being plan B after someone else's life fell apart. I loved you once in a way that made me blind. I can't love you like that again." She covered her mouth, a broken sound escaping. "So that's it?" she asked. "There's nothing left." I thought about all the nights I had lain awake, wondering if I could ever trust her again. I thought about the image of her in that cafe, fingers intertwined with his. I thought about the notebook with all those sentences about him, about feeling alive, about feeling seen. "There is something left," I said, "but it isn't what you think." Her brows knit together. "There's history," I said. "There's gratitude for the good years. There's sadness for what we lost. There's a kind of love, I guess, but it's not the kind that builds a future. It's the kind that lets go." She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "I can change," she said. "I can prove." "I don't need you to prove anything anymore," I interrupted, gently. "I don't need revenge. I don't need you to grovel. I don't even need you to hurt the way I hurt. I just need peace." She leaned forward, desperate. "What if this is your last chance?" she asked. "What if we never get another shot at this?" I held her gaze. "Then that's the consequence," I said softly. "Not just for you. For both of us." The silence that followed was heavy but strangely calm. No shouting, no slammed doors, just two people sitting in the ruins of what they once had, realizing you can't rebuild a house when the foundation itself is cracked. Her hands shook as she wiped her face. "Is there anything left for me here?" she asked in a small voice. I looked at her, at the woman I had once believed I would grow old with, at the stranger who had taken her place. "There's a conversation we still need to have," I said. "About the logistics, about the divorce, about our families. We owe each other that much honesty at least." She exhaled like the word itself cut her. "Divorce," she repeated. The syllables hung between us, final and cold. Her eyes met mine again, searching for some crack, some weakness, some sign that I was bluffing, but all she found was quiet. The morning we signed the papers was almost offensively beautiful. Bright blue sky, sunlight spilling over the city like nothing bad had ever happened here. People on the sidewalk laughing, holding coffee cups, walking dogs that had no idea their owners' hearts might be breaking. We met at the lawyer's office. Neutral ground, neutral walls, neutral language. The lawyer went over everything: assets, accounts, the lease on the apartment. The division of a life boiled down to bullet points and signatures. She sat next to me, close enough that our elbows almost touched, but there was a canyon between us now. Every once in a while, I caught the scent of her shampoo. It felt like smelling a memory. "Any questions?" the lawyer asked. We shook our heads, no questions left that papers could answer. "Once you sign, it becomes official within a few weeks," he said. He slid the documents across the table. A black pen lay on top, ordinary and heavy. My hand didn't shake as much as I thought it would. I read my name, her name, the words irrevocable dissolution. I thought of wedding vows, of till death do us part, and how no one ever writes into them what happens when you die in different ways while still breathing. I signed, she signed. That was it. A marriage ending with the dry scratch of pens on paper. When it was done, we stepped out into the sunlight together. The city noise rushed around us, engines, horns, chatter, a busker playing something soft on a guitar nearby. Life continuing. "Do you hate me?" she asked as we stood on the sidewalk. The question caught me off guard. I thought about it. Hate would have been simpler, cleaner, but what I felt was more complicated than that. "No," I said. "I don't hate you." She blinked, tears shining again. "I hate what happened," I continued. "I hate what it turned us into. I hate the version of myself I became when I knew but didn't want to know. But you." I shook my head. "I loved you." "That doesn't disappear completely. It just changes shape." She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that. "For what it's worth," she said, voice shaking, "I will spend the rest of my life regretting what I did to you." I believed her. But regret was a currency that couldn't buy back time. We walked together in silence for a block, then another. There was no script for this part, no right thing to say when you were both free and broken at the same time. At the corner, we stopped. The light above us clicked from red to green. People moved around us, stepping off the curb, crossing the street without looking back. "This is where we say goodbye," I said. She swallowed hard. "Can I hug you?" she asked. It was such a simple request. Once upon a time, it wouldn't even have been a question. Now it felt like a decision that mattered. "Yes," I said. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. For a brief moment, my body remembered everything. The late-night talks, the lazy Sunday mornings, her head on my chest, our breathing sinking as we drifted to sleep. Then the memory shifted. The cafe window, her hand in his, the notebook. I exhaled and let the memories pass through me like smoke, not clinging, not fighting, just letting them go. When she pulled back, her face was wet. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the years we had, for the way you loved me. For letting me go, even though I don't really deserve it." I nodded. "Take care of yourself," I said. You too, she replied, and just like that, she turned and walked away. I watched her until she disappeared into the crowd. She didn't look back, neither did I that night. I found myself awake again in the quiet apartment, not with the frantic, aching insomnia of the early days, but with a strange kind of stillness. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, even though it was far too late for caffeine. Outside, the city had softened into a hush, a few distant cars, the low murmur of a TV from another apartment. Rain beginning to tap gently against the glass again, almost as if on cue. I looked at the empty chair across from me, the same chair I'd stared at the night everything collapsed. Back then, it had felt like a symbol of everything I'd lost. Now it was just a chair. I thought of him, the other man, how he had lost everything he thought made him untouchable. How she had gone to him, and then returned to me only when his world fell apart. The version of me from before might have taken her back in that moment, out of habit, out of longing, out of the desperate need to believe love could conquer even this, but revenge had come in a different form. It wasn't spite. It wasn't public humiliation or a dramatic confrontation. It was the quiet realization that I didn't need what she was offering anymore. The real revenge was my own healing, my refusal to be the consolation prize. My choice to release her, not out of anger but out of self-respect. I thought about forgiveness. People like to talk about it like it's a switch you flip. One day you're angry, the next you're not. In reality, it was more subtle than that. Forgiveness, for me, wasn't about saying what she did was okay. It wasn't about pretending it hurt less than it did. Forgiveness was about setting down the weight of it, about deciding not to carry her choices on my back for the rest of my life. So in that small, quiet kitchen, with the rain pattering softly against the window and the city humming in the background, I did something I hadn't done before. I spoke to the empty room. I forgive you, I said. The words didn't feel miraculous. There was no sudden rush of warmth, no cinematic soundtrack swelling in the background, but they felt true. I forgave her. Not so she could sleep better at night, not so she could move on without guilt. I forgave her so I could move forward without bitterness. The morning light came earlier than I expected. Soft, pale rays seeped through the blinds, painting the room in a gentle glow. I had dozed off at the table, my head resting on my arm, the empty coffee mug beside me. I stood, stretched, and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The sky was a muted blue, promising a clear day. For the first time in a long time, the morning didn't feel heavy. It felt open, like a blank page instead of a sentence. I made coffee, one mug. I sat at the table, not across from the empty chair this time, but at the end, angled toward the window, watching the light grow stronger. There was no dramatic epiphany, no sudden sense of freedom, just small, quiet acceptance. This was my life now, my apartment, my routines, my mornings. I thought of her wherever she was, maybe in a new place, maybe back at her sister's, maybe lying awake, replaying a different set of memories. I hoped sincerely that someday she would forgive herself too, not to erase what she had done, but to stop letting it define her. As for me, I realized something simple. Letting go isn't an event, it's a series of small choices. To drink your coffee in peace, to stop checking your phone for messages that won't come, to stop rehearsing what you would say if you ever saw them again, to accept that the story didn't end where you thought it would, and that's okay. I took a slow sip, watching the steam rise in the gentle morning light. The city outside moved on cars, people, lives intersecting and breaking and healing in countless quiet ways. I set the mug down, felt the warmth in my chest, and let the simple truth settle in. She had begged me to take her back after the man she chose lost everything. Once that might have been enough. Now it wasn't. What I chose instead in this soft, unremarkable morning was something better. I chose myself. Better. I chose myself.